We are also in the process of actually setting up to test for the masks. We are noticing there's a big demand.
Good morning and welcome to episode 48 of the Crownsmen Show. Today we are joined by Kavinder Dhillon. He is the certification manager and owner of LabTest Certification. Have you ever wondered who tests critical care medical equipment to make sure it functions correctly, or solar panels to ensure they are designed to last, or the safety of an electric motor that will be installed in hazardous locations? Well, you're about to. Let's get on with episode 48.
This is going to be an interesting show because companies like LabTest serve a lot of different industries, anything from testing solar panels to testing hazardous facilities. And so we're going to really unpack everything today. And Kavinder is the owner of the company, so he gets to have that, we get that perspective from him, from building up the company from 2 people to 50. And so we're covering all sorts of ground. And I'm really looking forward to it. Kavinder, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jared, for having me here.
How are things mid-COVID for LabTest?
It's interesting and a learning experience for all of us. But I guess as people, we all learn to survive, so we're all making it through. But it is a little bit scary for everybody, but we're managing.
I was curious, do you do, because you're testing, and I'll give you a chance to give that overview of what the company does. Are you testing medical equipment and everything like that right now? Is that part of the service you're offering?
Yeah, part of the services that we do offer is the medical devices. So it be ventilators or X-ray machines or anything as a medical device. We are currently testing those. We are also in the process of actually setting up to test for the masks. We are noticing there's a big demand, and at the same time, there's a lot of issues that are being noticed by the health officials. The masks aren't what they have originally ordered from overseas or from other places. So
I've heard about that.
So we are in the process of actually building our own test machine. And to get this up and running, we're hoping we can get this going within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah. So, I guess for a company like yours, it's something you do, but it's really, I mean, there's a demand for it. But of course, you had no way of knowing that this was coming 2 months ago. 2 months ago, eh?
No, I don't think anybody did.
No.
As I mentioned, the medical devices, the actual, like the X-ray machines or any other device that gets used in a hospital, that was already our regular business stream that we offered. But testing for these PPEs is not something that we were originally set up. But we're noticing there is a backlog or a shortage of trying how we could basically also help in this COVID crisis to society as well.
If you were to make a guess, is this a demand that's now going to be new to the industry? I mean, obviously, every year it's not going to be at this scale, but there'll probably be new quotas and things like that put in place over the next few years. So that companies like yours will have pretty consistent testing that's going to be required. Would that be a fair assumption to make?
I think it will become more mandatory by the regulatory agencies. Like, for example, in Canada, Health Canada may require a little bit more, especially within the hospitals, or like, as we call them, the frontline workers, the hospitals. Mm-hmm. They will require, you could say, approved or certified equipment. But as yourself, myself, and the general public, unless they start pushing that, I don't see that happening, because it is a pretty big undertaking. And so you can't make everything mandatory for everybody. But
right,
we're also noticing people themselves, like yourself and myself, when we go out to buy a mask. We don't want to just buy any piece of cloth and put that over our mouth. We want to see, okay, you know what? Hey, this one's already been approved, or this one's good. Let's look at this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just like if you're buying tools and that, you see certification, so you know it's gone through a process. I want to get into, I mean, we've already touched on a little bit, but I want to give that snapshot, and we always try to do that on the show so that people just, it took me a little bit to understand actually what you did as a company, just the range of what you offer. So could you give that quick snapshot, and then we'll drill down into some of these offerings?
Well, we're a fairly small company, but the size fools a lot of people. But we are pretty diverse in the different industries that we are servicing.
Mm-hmm.
Electrical is one, as you know, electrical itself can be divided into so many different other substreams. Industrial equipment or household cooking appliances, or household appliances, or hazardous location equipment, medical devices. It goes on, anything that basically that you would plug into an outlet having 120 volts or 208 volts, that needs to be approved or certified. And so we are involved within that, but we also are involved with gas appliances or fuel burning appliances. That comes into place of your fireplaces, big boilers, furnaces that would take, say, natural gas, propane, or even wood or pellets for fueling and creating any kind of energy or heat exchange. We're also involved in building materials. A lot of people don't realize your windows, your doors, the house, the walls that you make, they all have requirements that they need to satisfy. So we're also involved in the building material industry as well. And then plumbing products, from your sinks, your toilets to bathtubs, pipes. We're also doing certification for those. And one of the crossovers is also the sanitation of, say you got your gas or your electrical cooking appliances that are used in commercial applications. We want to make sure that they're sanitary. And so we also do certification of those. So it is a pretty vast area that we're involved with, in addition to alternative energies. Solar is one of the key ones that we're also involved in. We do both the thermal solar as well as the photovoltaic solar energies. So we provide certification services for those. The certification, it is becoming global. So not just Canada or the United States. In some aspects, we have recognitions or accreditations to approve products for other international markets as well. So
Oh, I see.
it is becoming, I guess the old term was a one-stop shop for a lot of these manufacturers, because they don't want to be going through individual approvals from one country to another country. Just adds up their cost and time. So now with the certification agency becoming more, I guess, building up some more schemes or working together, we are able to test in one location to give you international approval. So there's a lot of things that are happening on the international side within the certification bodies themselves to help manufacturers get the products out to market, it be nationally or internationally.
I'm curious. So when you talk about a certification body, so are you do you in a sense apply to say that you can be authorized to certify this even if it's at an international scale? Like what is even that process? Because one of the things that we talked about on air before we go into it is just that fear that someone would have of putting together a product, bringing it from another country, bringing it into a market or bringing it into multiple markets, and just understanding what it takes to get something certified. I know from my perspective, when I started talking to you, I was thinking of it as a very daunting task. You don't look at it quite as, well, of course you're involved in it, so you know that process. So is it as hard as people would think it is to get a product? You find a window maker or a furniture maker or even something hazardous that needs to be brought into the market. How difficult is it to get certified in like a Canadian market?
Well, having been involved in this industry for, I guess I could say, it looks very simple to me. But we've also noticed, talking to a lot of the manufacturers, there's that fear. It's the old saying, the fear of the unknown. The process, if you follow the very basic rules, is first of all, you need to have a product. Now, does a product meet the standards, and where do you go get it tested? So I'll just back up a little bit, because as one of the items you make, us as a certification body, we go through quite a bit of a rigorous audits ourselves. We get audited to make sure that the stuff that we are actually testing and evaluating is up to standard, and it is equivalent with our other counterparts. So in Canada, we are audited by Standards Council of Canada. So ourselves and other competitors, so we have one body that overlooks everything to make sure we are doing our job properly. And then in Canada, we have our national standards, so we all test to the same standard. So the product, you go to us or one of our other competitors, it will need to meet the same standard. So there's no differences in that aspect. So it's the same standard that applies for that specific product. Now, for a manufacturer, one of the things I've always suggested to them is, it is best to sit down with the certification body and have an open discussion. What is your product? At the same time, not just the product for your short-term application. Have a 2-3 year plan. Okay, you make this widget. Okay, not just for Canada. Where do you want to do with this widget? You want to go into the United States? You want to go to Europe? You want to go to Asia? You have a plan or a strategy, or if you're open with a certification body, they will basically work with you to let you know what, if we use this route, this will basically get your first stage and second stage. That way you could basically piggyback on some of the other approvals you're doing. That helps putting together a forecasting plan and a path for you. We have seen a lot of clients will come to us, they have great products, and they say, we want this approved. Being an independent third body, that's our mandate. We will test a product, whatever you tell us, and that's it, we're done. We will test it, and we'll give you the certification. And 2 months later, you will say, oh, okay, now I need it approved for this country over here now. We will go through the whole process again. But if we were to have that sit-down meeting in the beginning and look at and work as a partnership with them, and then we could have had all this done in the first stages. And that would have saved the redundant testing cost and the redundant testing time. So it's a communication. So one of the things I would suggest, if anybody is is manufacturing a product or wants to go through the certification, take the 5 minutes. Just have a call with your certification body and give them what your intentions are for the short term and the long term. We do get, when we're talking to clients, they will say, you know what, we want certification for the world. And jokingly, we laugh with them. That's like, okay, you might as well just give us a blank check and we'll do it for you. Look at a 2 to 3 year plan. And if we basically work within those, then you will be on your way for a global approval. So the world is a big place, but you need to work in stages. So we will work with you in stages. So it's best to sit down in the beginning and set up this stage. That's the biggest thing I would tell any manufacturer, anybody who wishes to go through certification.
That's very interesting you say that, because I mean, I couldn't even begin to count the time people have, I went to startup events or things like that, and they have new product. And I always wonder, how do these big companies get products into the market so efficiently? But they would understand those processes that you're talking about, that whereas you see someone with a little widget and they're going to take it to sell to the world. And I always think, why do they have such a tough time with that? But that's probably a major hurdle that a lot of people just are not realizing what they're going to have to go through. And if they don't do it in the proper stages, they're just going to it's going to be very costly over time, because they didn't have those stages that they needed to carry out.
Yeah, you are correct in that. That's pretty much a lot of those manufacturers, they're just jumping in with both feet. So it's better, it's to have a plan. As we all learn, to plan is much better than not having any plan. So but the strategy actually kind of is very cost effective, because in the beginning, like you said, we just want Canada. Yeah, we'll do the certification for Canada. But a lot of people don't realize certification for Canada is very similar for certification for the United States. And then if you got into that stages, then you know what, depending on the standards you use, because there's a lot of harmonization happen. If we use the right standards, we could also do your approvals for the European market. So these are kind of little things that we would basically discuss with you in the beginning, instead of somebody just sending us an email or sending us a product. Here it is, please have this certified for this market. That's it.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about, and I want to drill down into one of the specific products, because I find it so interesting. The hazardous location testing, that's very interesting. Of course, now after we did our pre-interview, I was walking around and I'm looking at all these places. I'm thinking, I wonder if that would be considered a hazardous. Probably most of the things I'm looking at are like these pipelining and these different setups around the city that I think, well, of course, they would have had to get huge certification for that. But before we go into that one, I want to go into the solar side of things, because you sort of did something interesting where your head office is here in Delta in BC, but you set up a facility to do testing in Vegas, I believe. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about why that was required to do the solar panel testing.
Well, you can say about 8 years ago or 10 years ago, the solar industry was on the upstream, and everybody was getting into it. And we also got involved in the testing. So we had to go through our accreditation process. We went through that. And we started doing the thermal solar testing. And part of the test out of the thermal solar test is you need to do an exposure test. And living in Vancouver, the wonderful weather that we do have in Vancouver for, I guess, joke and run, for 2 months in the summertime, it's great. But the other time, it's pretty gray. So a test to do a solar test in Vancouver would take about 6 months to do, just because of the sunshine. So we actually were looking around where would be a good location, and obviously Nevada, you get a lot more sun than Vancouver. So we moved the facility into Las Vegas because it's interesting. A lot of people, when we're talking about, they go, well, because of the gambling, the strip, and everything else. But a lot of people don't realize Las Vegas is one of those places that every major city around the world flies into. So it could become a pretty big hub that way. So it's easy for transportation, and easy for people to fly into Vegas. The business cost was also a lot better, but the biggest thing was the weather. It has a lot more sunshine. In Vancouver, it's a 2-hour flight, so it was allowing us to fly there and fly back in a day if I needed to. So the close proximity was the biggest thing, and the sunshine was the main reason for opening up in Las Vegas. It had nothing to do with the strip or anything like that. That was the main reason.
Not even like 2%.
Not even 2%. Okay. Not even 2%. It's gone the opposite way, if you really want to, because now it's taking the fun out of going to Vegas.
Yeah, exactly. I've been to Vegas for work, and it's not the greatest city to try to work in.
So part of the solar testing, as I mentioned, there's a 30-day exposure test. You must have 30 days of sunshine, sunny days, and so that was taking up a certain amount. So we have to basically sum up the energy for every day that makes up the day, and so it's much faster to do that. So once we were able to get over the hurdle of the 30-day exposure test, and then the rest of the test, the performance testing, was a lot simpler and a lot easier to do. The only challenge we did find in Vegas was the extreme heat. The weather does get into, say, 40 degrees Celsius and plus in the summertime. And so that itself was a challenge, but we were able to adapt to it. The solar testing itself, it's pretty intense, especially when you get into the efficiency readings, because one of the challenges that we found out was the deviation, because we use water as the main fluid that we pass through for thermal solar, because that's what it's used to heat up water. So the water temperatures, we had to keep within plus or minus 1 degrees of whatever was required. And that itself is a challenge. It's a lot of people don't understand the thermal solar. Doing some of the tests, we would get water temperatures in excess of 200 degrees Celsius. It wasn't water, but it would be glycol. They would use other fluids. But the sun does heat up a lot of creates a lot of heat.
So that so you did that eight years ago, and then does that, when you do something like that, I just want to quickly shift over into just the operations of your business. Is that does you talk about planning? Did companies, was that a demand that was already there, or did they once you put that facility out in Vegas, did it up a lot of your exposure to the market and draw in a lot of new business?
Well, when we opened up the facility, the demand was there. It's like anything else. It's the demand in the thermal or in the energy efficiency. We're noticing a lot of the demand comes from the governments or the regulations the way that we're going. So the demand was very big for both PV, photovoltaic, and the thermal. But we also learned over time the demand started decreasing. A lot of these products started coming from overseas, from China or some of the other markets around the world, which drove down the prices and made it challenging for a lot of the labs or manufacturers in North America to manufacture these products. And as well as we also noticed some of the grants or government funding or incentives were cut down, cut back, which also reduced the demand. So we did notice the business was on the downturn, but we still kept up with the solar testing. But what we also did was within our Las Vegas, we having the other accreditations, we also started adding the electrical, the gas, and various other disciplines that we have. So we diversified our testing capabilities in Las Vegas. So
I see.
So that also helped us go through the, I guess, the challenges of the solar industry. Right now, we are one of the few solar labs for thermal solar in North America. So some of the other labs are shut down because the industry went down, but we went through the storm, and actually we're coming out of the storm in very good shape now, because we're kind of capturing the market in that aspect of solar testing.
Good. That's good to hear. I just want to quickly go over before we move into some of the hazardous testing. When you're testing a solar panel, so you're putting it in heat, but I mean, are you taking it all apart? Are you how extensive does a test get? Does someone ship you 100 solar panels? Do they ship you 2? How do you even go through that process of testing? Because obviously, whoever's sending them to you has the intention of large scale manufacturing for the product. So, what is the process of making sure that it can be certified, or you can give it the certification?
Well, the thermal solar the process for us is very simple. You also have to keep in mind this product is going to be used in residential applications and shared with everybody, and you need to have the longevity of the product that it's going to withstand. So to start the process, what we do is we actually will go to the manufacturing site and randomly pull out 5 samples.
Oh.
So they are manufacturing, have their own manufacturing. We will basically pull out 5 samples. Out of those 5 samples, we will actually take 2 to the lab. We will label the 5 samples. And we have a destructive label, so those samples can't be opened or altered or anything like that. So it's a sample selection. We do a sample selection randomly.
Right.
And those 2 we will basically label, we'll have serial numbers, and we will say, okay, send us this particular product. It will come to the lab. We will basically start doing the testing. As I was mentioning, the first stage of the testing is a 30-day exposure test. You could consider it as conditioning. We're starting to condition the product as how it's going to be used and what kind of abuses or the environment that the product's going to be exerted to. As we all know, the sun is pretty demanding on everything. So we will let the product sit there for 30 days in the sunlight, and before we start doing some of the other tests, the product will also go through some physical tests. We will do overpressure tests. We will basically fill it up with excessive pressure. We will dry the product out, do quite a bit of rigorous impact test, There is impact test done on the glass itself. For example, like an example would be dropping marbles is a good way of saying it onto the screen. Are they going to crack, or what it's going to go through? After we do all our performance testing and the actual physical the tests that we do, we actually dismantle the product. We will basically take it apart. In some places we will actually cut it to see what kind of damage or abuse has happened to the product, because we want to make sure when it goes out into the world that it is going to withstand certain abuses as per the standard of longevity. That we don't want to just to test a product goes out, then after a month or 2 months, that's it stops working, or it rusts out, or other things happen. So there is some physical evaluations, checks we do after we do all the tests, as we basically cut into the product and see what damages have happened. And that's, if there is no damage, that's when we will say this product passes. But if we do notice some quite a bit of rusting or other issues, the product will fail. So you might have the best, highest efficiency ratings, but if the product is rusted or there's damage inside, there's a high likelihood the product will still fail the actual certification.
You know, that leads me to, I mean, if I'm a manufacturer and I spent millions of dollars, you take out however many samples, how do companies view that? I mean, it's such a big investment that they make, and then you do this testing. I mean, is there a general way that companies approach it, or I mean, or is it? Do you think they lean towards wanting to get it pushed out there, or most companies pretty vigorous in wanting to make sure that it's strong, it's a good product before they go out into the market? I mean, obviously every company is different, but in general, how do the companies honestly approach it?
Well, in general, every company wants to have a good product going out to the marketplace, because that's what really represents them. It's their brand, is their product. That's what people see, and that's what sells more. So they do worry about what is out in the marketplace. It is a big challenge. It's a big investment. A lot of the companies see the standards that we test to. You got to consider these are the bare industry set bare minimum. This is the bare minimum you need to comply with. We have clients that we work with. Yeah, they go way beyond the bare minimum. Say if we're basically testing a product to, for example, say minus 20 degrees. It's just random. They may test a product to minus 40 degrees. They want to basically make sure their product goes beyond what is required. We are only testing to the bare minimum industry set requirements.
I see. So they've done all their own testing, kind of like Ford building a car, and they go out and take it out onto lakes and mountains and beat it up, and then they take it for the minimum testing through a certification company.
Correct. And that's right. That's one of the business that we do in some aspects. We have clients who will come in, just do R&D testing. And because they know it is still a challenge to go through our certification route, but they will come in, do the R&D test and see how they're coming along, and they break it up in stages. So that also helps them a great deal in basically saving time and saving money as well, because if you wait for the last minute, here's a product, you send it to the lab, you have no idea. But if you're doing some certain stage testing, 1, 2, 3, you know how it's going to be behaving.
Are most companies up on that, or do you still run into a lot of companies that don't, do they actually do their sort of bare minimum testing, manufacture the product, and then bring it to you and it fails? Like, does that happen very often, or do most companies pretty heads up about doing it in stages, maybe working with you to do the R&D, over testing on their end, or do most companies get it right, or are there a lot of companies that don't?
Well, it goes both ways. The companies that are always the big companies that are always manufacturing, they know this is actually the faster and the cheaper way of doing R&D testing internally or externally, doing R&D testing. You do have to keep in mind, even those companies that do their own R&D testing stage, they still, there's many times that they will still get non-compliances when they go through our testing. That still happens as well, because sometimes we have sequences. You have to go through the same product or same unit has to have all the tests done on the same sequence. So there's a lot of things that when you read the standard in detail, that's what we are That's our professional part of it, is meeting the standard, going through the stages and how the tests are originally set up. So that um, I would say on average, probably about 60% of the products are they fail the first time.
Really? It's that high?
Yes.
Wow. Wow.
And if
So, wow, I didn't expect it to be that high. Wow.
and if you are basically just and if you've never gone through this and you just send in for certification, there is a lot very high likelihood that there will be some issues.
Yeah. But like you said, it's going to save people a lot of money. And if they go out to the market and then it gets returned, and or one of their, your toaster starts a fire, you got a much bigger issue than than having to recertify it, I suppose, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the things it's more of a clarity. A lot of people, when they say, you know what, this product's been certified, it has this certification mark on, it's already gone through this, that the product it's safe. It's we No certification agency will ever come out and say this product is ultimately safe. What we do is we test a product to the industry set minimum criteria.
Right.
That criteria level could go up or it could go down depending on whatever the committee who prepared the standard. We are meeting the same criteria. It's a standard. Standard, I guess, another definition of a standard is equality for everybody. So we want to
Right.
make sure the level is the same. Some manufacturers they will have set a higher limit, so sometimes they'll ask us to go to a higher criteria. But for us to certify a product, as long as it meets the minimum criteria, we will basically certify the product. So saying a product is ultimately safe is not I guess the correct way of saying it. What we do say, the product meets the minimum criteria of the standard.
Right. No, that makes sense. I want to move on to this hazardous locations, and I'm just biased because personally I find it quite interesting. Is Tell us what a hazardous location is. I mean, I can probably think of a few off the top of my head, but there's probably a few that I wouldn't think of as hazardous locations off the top. So can you throw out a few so we get an idea of what that would cover?
Well, in layman's term, I guess you could consider any location inside or outside that has a potential to ignite a flammable dust, vapor, gas, or create any kind of explosive environment. So it could be in an oil refinery. It could be your wheat barn. It could be your wood shop that you have a lot of dust flying around. Those are also considered hazardous location. A gas station. So it's an environment that can be created that has a potential to ignite a flammable dust, gas, or a vapor. That's basically in a nutshell what the definition is.
Do you work in a specific? Is there a one that you sort of specialize in, or is it pretty across the board? What LabTest will do?
What we do is we will evaluate the product, the equipment itself, and when we say the product, it meets the requirements of hazardous location, or EX is the international, I guess, the way generically they say it, explosive atmospheres. The equipment that we evaluate, we will want to make sure that it is not going to ignite that gas or that dust. So we will basically go through the sequence of that. For example, explosion-proof enclosures is probably the most widely used method of protection or equipment rating. What that is, say, for example, you have a motor. A motor will create sparks and etc. as it's rotating, depending on the motor or the way it's designed. You got switching on and off. So if you put that motor into an oil field or a location where there's always a flammable, say gases, say hydrogen. It's in a room full of hydrogen. We want to make sure that motor itself is not going to ignite that hydrogen. So there's not going to be no sparks. So what happens, the motor will get put into an explosion-proof enclosure. So now this component is inside an enclosure. We will basically we'll put that motor in a box. We'll basically fill the box with hydrogen. The motor, inside the motor, we will basically create some sparks. So imagine a spark, like just in a car, like you start your car, we will basically put a spark plug in it as an example. In the motor, we will start igniting it. We will spark it. Now, if that motor itself ignites inside, there's gases inside the motor we also put in. We'll put in the hydrogen inside the motor, and we'll put the hydrogen inside the bigger box as well. So if the motor itself, the spark ignites, and obviously it's going to ignite, the hydrogen is basically going to catch fire. Now, does that hydrogen itself, the explosion, will it ignite the gas that's out in the box? Which is our environment. So if the ignition inside the motor does not ignite the outside gas, it passes because it maintained all the explosion proof inside. Now, if the gas or the flame got outside the motor and ignited the outside of the box, now you blew up, basically, if it's in a refinery, you just blew up the whole refinery.
So its containment is what is getting certified.
So that's why I say it's explosion proof. The explosion is staying inside the box. So that's one way of looking at it. So there's so many different ways. The other is the amount of energy. You must have energy to ignite something. So this is what we call intrinsic safety. So if there's not enough energy, even when you create these sparks to ignite the gas, then it's fine. You could put it in, and then we will rate it for the different gases. Every gas has a different flash point, etc. So we will rate the product differently for the different gases, or even as well as for the different dusts. So that's how we actually will do some of the testing. So sometimes when we do the testing, depending on the size of the product, we will basically wake up the whole neighborhood when we do have those big explosions. So that's the fun part of the work.
I was going to say, I'm kind of thinking about getting a part-time job with you if I'll just hold the match or however you start this. You wouldn't want me doing it. So actually, I do want to ask, though, in all seriousness, though, the people that are working that, is that something, does every person on your team have to have very specific certifications? Or is it kind of like a building where you've got a few, certified carpenters, but then you can have helpers and people like that around? Like, what does it actually take to be involved in a team like yours, in the testing facilities themselves?
As I was mentioning, we go through accreditation process because we've got to make sure that the people that are testing the products, they themselves are qualified. They themselves have been trained. So they go through, internally, we'll go through a training process of different levels. We have people who are just testers, and then we have people who do the engineering evaluations of the product. Then we also have people who are actually do the reviews. So there are different levels. But we also keep it independent. The reviewer is an independent person within our company who reviews other people's work. So he's not influenced. So it's an independent review that gets done to make sure everything is done properly and signs off everything. So there are some systems that we have in place to make sure that internal independence is done, to make sure everything is done properly. The people themselves, these programs are not taught in universities or anything like that. So a lot of it is on the job training and going through training processes. So we do work with working in stages as well. And so understanding the different concepts of the different standards of the different technology as different industries. We have, for example, in the electrical side, we're talking about explosion proof. You have explosion proof equipment on one side, then you might have a medical equipment on the other side. Two different types of equipment, so two different disciplines need to be learned. So those kind of things, a lot of it is on the job training, and training is very important in our industry.
It's very interesting. It really is. It's something I kind of wondered about in passing for a long time. So I was pretty happy when we confirmed that you were going to be coming on the show. I wanted to get into, we've covered quite a bit of ground, and I'm happy with this because we've actually dissected some of it. And I think just even for people I've talked to over the years, I think it's very helpful information just to understand it. I wanted to kind of we've already talked about some of the regulations and things like that. And I wanted to, before we wrap up the show, talk a little bit. I mean, in our pre-interview, you talked about putting a you're from 2 to 50 people, so you're still not this massive company, but it's not small either. That's quite a few people and quite a bit of growth. What was it? First off, just from the very beginning, the choice to go into this business. What prompted that?
Well, for me, this industry has been I joke on this has been my first job since graduating. So, so right out of college, I got into this industry. I didn't even know this industry existed, and that their products needed to be tested and certified, like I say, in universities or colleges. We weren't, I guess at that time, we didn't know about that. We weren't taught that. Maybe, so I didn't even know this industry existed. So I got involved in this industry in 1992 with another certification body, one of the larger ones in the world. Over the course of the years, learned a lot, and as I guess personal growth, I guess I just needed to branch out myself. And in 2003, started LabTest, and so in the beginning there was just two of us, and it was interesting. We had a lab. You could say, I guess, a warehouse. We were doing some testing. We were doing some testing for some of the other bigger other agencies. They would subcontract to us to do the testing, and the other time we would basically be in the back playing soccer or something like that, indoor soccer.
Yeah.
We had enough, but from there we've come a long ways. In 2007, we added our accreditations and started growing. Our biggest challenge right now is finding space. The growth is we in 2 years ago we moved from Richmond to Delta and doubled our physical size, and now we're already noticing within 3 years we've already outgrown this place. And so adding people, that's been the rewarding part. So we're starting with 2, we're just under 50 people now, but with our network of partnerships that we have, if we were to count their people, it could easily go over 10,000 people. So we have that flexibility to work with our partners. Some of our partners are competitors. That's how close we do work with each other. So we try to help each other. So the industry is, in that way, it's very rewarding and helpful among ourselves as well. So that also keeps it exciting. And one of the other things, as we were mentioning, when blowing up things or doing things, it is rewarding. Every week you're scratching your head. This looks interesting. Where did this come from? So you're always seeing something new. So that's what keeps the drive for myself. That's what keeps the drive. So it's that the new thing that's always coming on. It's like we're still little kids. Like you can say, kids playing in the sandbox sometimes. But that's the interesting part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I was only half joking about the part-time job. I would be pretty, but what is it for you? Kind of said, getting to test and that part being rewarding. Is that the primary thing? Like, I mean, you have partners, you have employees, you have multiple locations, you're working with large manufacturing companies, you're working in different industries. Is there sort of a part of it that you really are drawn to? Do you like the leadership part? Some people are drawn to different things. What is it for you to run a company like this?
There's two parts there. There's the business aspect of it. You got to look out there, and as a business owner, your responsibility is the key responsibility is always your staff, your employees.
Mm-hmm.
That is your strength. That is your family. So from day one, we considered our business as we're growing. It's a family business. We kept everybody has equal say. Myself, I could say I'm the president, but anybody who starts brand new has the equal say to come up with ideas and everything else. We do have our general meetings, and we've kept a very flat structure, and that's helped us a great deal. Is to keep everybody equal. So that's been our strength. To grow is having everybody have equal say in what goes on, what goes wrong. There are times I have people coming to me and say, Kavinder, no, that's wrong. We shouldn't do that. And they are right. And so I have to be able to listen to them as well. You know what? It doesn't always have to be my way. I have to be able to listen to what is happening. And sometimes they know better than I do. And I have to be able to admit that. And we're very open about that. personally, what the challenge, what I like about this, I was mentioning, it's when you get especially the smaller companies, somebody who's starting out, the young entrepreneurs, working with them. And I try to get involved with it as much as I try, because sometimes overstep my boundaries, poking my, hey, can I learn about this or come into this? It's helping these young companies who are starting out and helping them get into the various different markets and seeing them grow. That's probably the rewarding part, is seeing companies who start out with an idea and then they grow and then they're out there selling thousands or millions of these products. That's where a lot of the reward comes from.
When you said something about it being, you've developed it flat and people have equal say, and there's so much value in that, and it leads me to another question though, and I think a lot of people that were running companies, especially growing companies, big decisions need to be made, like going to Vegas. I'm sure that wasn't a small decision that needed to be made. You're already expanding. You're saying your office here is already you're getting to overcapacity. How about those big decisions? How do you make those with you want people's input, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to make a decision. How do you get to how do you approach them?
Well, so far I've been lucky because the team that we all have very similar thinking. So that makes it a lot easy. We haven't come across where say I wanted to do one thing and the other team wanted to do another. We haven't come across that. So we all have the same thinking. Yeah, sure, there's times you have to give all the information. It's sharing of the information, and communication is the key thing. If I could present my ideas, what we're doing, and they also present their ideas, what they're doing, we will come up to a resolution. What is actually going to work? So communication and having the transparency is one of the key things. So, but you are right. At the end of the day, it's do we go left or right? It is comes out to myself, but then I also have to take the full responsibility for that.
Right.
You can't just make the decision and not take responsibility, even if, you know what, maybe you failed. Okay, we failed, at least we try. And that's one of the things that the company itself, we know is like, until you try something, you're not going to know. And I joke around with the people, how many times did Edison make the light bulb? It wasn't just once. How many times did he fail? So it's very you true. Have to try, and you learn from your mistakes. So what I've told people within our company is, making mistakes is fine. That's normal. The only two things: don't kill anybody and don't put me in jail. We're allowed to make mistakes. If it's just money, that's fine. We'll deal with the money part.
That's why you won't hire me part-time, because I'll light the match in too many spots. Kavinder, I'm really happy you came on the show. It's one of those topics that I know is helpful for people. A lot of we see the people that watch our show. We can see the industries, and in them, Google maybe collects too much information. I don't know, but we do see who watches, and I know there's going to be people that they're just going to find it really helpful. And I just wanted to clarify on the industrial side, like heavy equipment, or like machines in the mining or energy sector. Do you get into that kind of testing as well? We don't need to spend much time on it as we wrap up. I just wanted to clarify if you get into that bigger set stuff, just for the people that watch from that sector.
Yes, we do. Energy efficiency, we do work for the Energy Star or the NRCan for our energy efficiency criteria for Canada. So we're involved with that. We're also involved in industrial equipment, heavy industrial equipment. We're working with, an example would be right now we have a client out of Canada who wishes to export trucks into Russia. So we're working with them. So it's a pretty wide area of products that we get into, like I was saying, electrical products or industrial products. It could be a small product, or it could be a very large product. So we do get into that quite a bit.
Okay, good. That's probably an interesting project right there, the ones getting to Russia. We'll have to get you back on again, and you'll have to walk us through that actual process, maybe get them on to talk about it as well. It'd be interesting. Kavinder, thank you very much for coming on the show. I'm going to do a quick sign off here. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and hopefully we'll get you back on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, and have a good day and stay healthy.
Okay, thank you. You too. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for watching. That's another episode of the Crownsmen Show. Please keep watching. Gowdy will do the sign off to ways you can sponsor, support, possibly join the show. It's great to have the fans that we do that watch every single week. And thank you again, Kavinder, for coming on. It was great to have him and talk about LabTest certification. Thank you. See you on the next episode.
Thank you for watching. Please remember to subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can also listen to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're a dedicated fan and would like to help support the production of The Crownsmen Show, then please head on over to crownsmen.com/donations. We have actually set up 2 initial donation options, the $5 monthly subscription option and the Support Heavy Industry one-time donation. These are all through PayPal. Again, that is crownsmen.com/donations. Thank you so much for your support, and we'll see you on the next episode.